Right, good morning everyone. Thanks for joining us on our second webinar on reopening safely, working safely. Today we'll be focusing on manufacturing sector. We've got a couple of very good speakers to tell us about their experiences and some of their tips. Just some housekeeping for today and how it'll run. We can't see or hear you, but you can still interact with us through the Q&A box at the bottom. So you can put your questions on the Q&A box rather than the chat, and then we'll be able to deal with those as we go, and we'll have some time at the end, hopefully, to go over some of your questions. Bear in mind that the panel is being recorded, so just bear that in mind. It'll be posted on our website later in the week. Today we've got a couple of really good speakers. I'll just give you a couple of minutes on what the Growth Hub has been doing in terms of the COVID crisis and then into the restart. And we'll hand over to Phil Anders from the Manufacturing Growth Fund, who can give us some really kind of good insight into some of the things that are available for businesses. And then we'll pass on to David from Blue Chip Technology, which is a business within Cheshire and Warrington who has been trading, and he can share some of his experience around what's happened and how to continue to trade and work safely. So we'll get straight into it. So my name is Andy Devaney. I'm the Director of Business Innovation at the Cheshire and Warrington Local Enterprise Partnership. That essentially means that I look after the Growth Hub and some of our skills and investment programs, leading the response in the COVID crisis. So what we've been trying to do over the past couple, it seems like longer now, over the past 2 to 3 months really, is to make sure that businesses are kept fully informed around what support packages are available, both from government but also locally. Engage with businesses as much as possible through surveys and other things, and ensure that they're introduced to those packages, be it the furlough scheme, or the CBILS loans, or the business rate grants. It's important that we really make sure our businesses on our patch are fully informed and have given the best chance to succeed through this crisis and move on to growth. As we move on, we're now looking to do much more surveys, and we're looking to get as much intelligence as we can from businesses. We feed that directly back into government to make sure that the packages that are created are really taking into account real business need. The LEP is working hard to make sure that we're joined up across the whole sub-region with local authorities and other partners like FSB and other business organisations to make sure that information is really joined up, to give you the best intel and the best opportunities. I'll leave it there today because I think we want to get straight into the speakers. So we can pass over to Phil, who can give us some really good intel on what's been happening in this sector.
Good morning. Rachel, have you got a slide to me, please? Oh, there we go. Brilliant. So one of the things we've been picking up as we've been sort of like talking to business across the whole of Northwest, so it's quite a broad spectrum, is some of the areas that they've been really struggling with. And if we look at some of the key points that they're telling us, what they're looking for is how can they emerge from lockdown really safely? How can they, sorry, can we move this on, Rachel? So it's not moving on this, or can I move it? Can everybody hear me? Oh, there we go. Can we move to the next one, please? Sorry.
Yeah, just so you know, just let me know when you need the slides changed, and I can change each slide.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. So if you can move to the next one, please. Okay, so the first things that we're really finding is that people are really worried about going back. They're really worried about that. I think they've got very used to the fact that locked into their sort of houses and places and homes, they feel quite safe. And going back is proving a lot of challenges in terms of how do they keep away from people, in terms of distancing, and remote working to become far more sort of a viable option for them. And people don't really feel as the need to work from an office as much anymore, but to get back up and running, it's got to become far more seamless. So what we're looking at is how do people talk to customers and suppliers? And one of the key issues is how can they stay as lean as possible? Just keeping a workplace sort of extremely lean, because that can mean that you can social distance in a lot of ways far better because process set up to actually mimic social distancing. Can we move to the next one, please? So as everybody will probably know, some of these you know anyway, work from home if you can. Where it's not possible in manufacturing and places like that, it's carry out a proper risk assessment. consult yourself with your workers and your trade unions, and there's some key stuff on risk assessment guides from the Centre of Assessments where you can just download it, and we can get you the information on that if you want it. And it's typically managed to take the 2 meters apart. Now, for some businesses, that is proving really troublesome, because the activities mean people need to be actually closer than 2 meters apart to lift, to move, to bend, and it's not as easy. So how do you manage the transmission risk? And it's about giving the right PPE. And one of the things that one of my businesses doing in your region is they've split the shifts and they're doing clean downs, massive deep clean downs between every shift, and that's getting them back to work in a different way they were before. It's not they're in the same sort of 8-hour block. They're actually managing shift patterns across that and changing the processes to actually manage that. Can we move on, please? The next key one that people are really struggling with, and there's a lot of good resources out there for that, is the mental health consideration, because it's a challenge also being at home locked down with loved ones, with friends, with families, but it's also how do you manage that to get back into work? How have people been locked down at home? What is it playing on them? Because a lot of people like social interaction, and when you not able to talk to people in the same way, going to meet people in the same way, whether it be at work, whether it be a coffee shop, whether it be a pub or restaurant, these things really impact on how people sat at home and feeling about the things that are important to them. So there's some really good health packs and resources around the growth company. So we can, and there's a link there to the mental health and wellbeing resource packs. If anybody wants that, or anybody needs anything at the end of this, give me a shout and I can get all the information collected together and sent to you via an email as well. We move on to the next one, please. So, as I said before, key one is talking to your customers and suppliers. And at the moment, this isn't as easy as it sounds, because I've got quite a lot of businesses who have come back to work whose suppliers haven't, and they're finding it difficult to find their supplies, and they've also not got the demand from their customers as well. So it's going to take a while for that to come back. It's going to take a long time for those things to return to some kind of normality. And where you've got businesses reducing at reduced capacity at the moment, they're obviously not being able to supply their customers as quick if they can't get the raw material. So it's a complete supply chain issue that we're seeing from, and this is feedback from proper businesses like yourselves and real-time information. Some have diversified, they've gone into PPE and things like that, and hand sanitizers and gels, and others have gone into looking for issues around the NHS and food. And it's also one of the key problems is giving an accurate forecast of demand. It's not as easy as it seems to be, because you don't know what's coming in after time. There can be quick turnarounds, people going back to work and demanding things now. And it's about having that dialogue. And again, that's not as easy, because when your suppliers aren't open, you can't even get a conversation to start sometimes. So it's about opening that discussion now and having a really open, honest, transparent, and valid discussion about when you're coming back to work, what are your suppliers doing, what are your customers needing, how you can fulfill that in a very different way than you've probably done in the past. Could we have a look at the next one, please? And don't hold stock. Whatever you do, you'll just tie up your cash flow. You'll just end up with sort of like too much stock that people might not want at the end of the day. And I know that a lot of the thing about people think if they're making something, they're making products and they've got it there to sell, but you actually be able to sell it. And going back to that principle about lean methodologies, that balancing your supply chains and demand, that's still key. That's still crucial. That's still what you should be doing. So keep lean. Sorry, stay lean and move on. So some of the recovery tips we've been talking to people about are exactly what we're doing today, using technology far better in terms of speaking to suppliers, your customers and other people. We want to look at things like zoning and isolating people in the workplace. Can you do that? Can you set out things in such a way that it's got segregated areas where you can get people working safely? Minimise the transmission by giving people proper PPE and that social distancing again. collaborating over your commanding, you know, who can set the lead, who can empower people, who can do things in that, in working in your business and not being sort of like top down. Big one is maintaining communication, you know, whether it be face to face, whether it be Zoom, whether it be Microsoft Teams, or whether it be just phone calls, or just speaking to people, having a conversation with them, and, you know, your customers, suppliers, and ensuring that, you know, you're maintaining a dialogue. And then again, rewarding and recognizing, you know, some people are working under very stressful situations. Make sure that you can actually speak to them and say, look, you know, we really understand what you're doing for us. You know, we clap for the carers on a Thursday night, and this is, you know, not dissimilar. People are, you know, in the same issues here. Can we move on, please? And the Manufacturing Growth Fund is here to help. Any of those issues you're facing about assessment lean methodologies and looking for new customers, diversification, sales. Typically, we run a project with 15k project cost, 36% grant funding, and that'll get you about a 5.4k grant. It starts at about a 3k project cost and goes up to about 24, and with the same 36% funding. So we're here to help. We're here to speak to you. And if you've got any questions, please do send anything through to me at any time. And I think that's probably me on the last one, isn't it? Done. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. That's really helpful. And if you can try and stick around, we can hopefully have some questions later on. Right, we'll move over to David, who's going to give us a kind of perspective of a trade and business and how they've been able to work. So, Phil, can I ask you to mute and knock your camera off, and we'll pass over to David to do his. Thanks very much.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Quite interesting, actually, because I think I'm going to repeat a lot of what Phil's just said, but it's actually the things that we've done to continue trading. So if you wouldn't mind moving on to the next slide, please. Yeah, and next one, please. So a little bit about Blue Chip Technology. We're based just outside Tattenhall in Chowley Oak, which is quite a rural environment. It's quite a nice place to have a factory, to be honest. It's not what I'm used to. I've been here about 12 months. And I used to run a factory in Wrexham that was really on an industrial estate. So this is quite a different environment, and it's actually been incredibly helpful to us. It's one of our limitations. So we often used to worry about recruiting, because there's no public transport to where we're at. People have to drive. It's 8-10 miles outside Chester, 10 miles from Wrexham. And that's often been difficult for us, but actually it's probably been a godsend during this crisis, because we're out in the middle of nowhere, and most of our neighbours have all started working from home. So actually we've typically been the only people on the industrial estate. There's probably normally about 300 or 400 cars, and today there's probably about 15. Yeah, so we design and manufacture embedded electronics. So these are the electronics that go into other machines. They're in everything from trains to security devices to medical equipment. And we do that for a huge variety of customers, big customers like Siemens and United Technologies, and tiny little startups that just have a good idea but need some electronics to realize it and don't necessarily have those skills in-house. Build everything to order. We're pretty lean to start with. We've got our own equipment, which so we're not going out and getting the electronics made. We're actually designing them, and we've got control over when we make them, how many we make. But that makes it a relatively complex business. A couple of the boards you see there have got about 600 to 700 components on, so you can imagine our sourcing and our purchasing is quite complex, and they come from a lot of different places. We very much buy a lot of things in Asia, because that's obviously how we get costs, so we'll talk a little bit about that. We're about 35 people and a £4 million turnover at the moment. Next slide, please. So when COVID-19 really started to become apparent, we changed the focus of our daily meetings to try and understand how we were going to control the business. And I think we quite quickly focused on two things, which were protect our people and protect the business, and very deliberately in that order. So we were very careful and conscious to every single day talk about what was going on in the world, what we needed to do for our people first, and then what that meant for the business second. Next slide, please. So as I say, staying informed was the biggest thing we were doing in the early days, and we were always conscious that the only way we could defend our actions was to say that we were following government advice. So in every single communication we made to our people, whether it was face-to-face or in emails or on notice boards, We really hammered home that message of follow the government advice, and we tried to say the company were doing that, and we expected all of our people to do that. And to be fair, pretty much everybody has. I can't even think of a single incident where I've been frustrated by somebody doing something they shouldn't have done. We've had a fantastic response from every one of our employees. We kept the communications going. Where possible, there were a lot of insecurities. We've all lived through it now. We all know it was a strange time. We had some ideas from people that we hadn't thought of ourselves, and we were very careful to implement those quickly and visibly so that people felt that they were being listened to. Good example of that was in the electronics manufacturing area, we have to check our static grounding whenever we're in the assembly areas. So everybody wears anti-static shoes or anti-static straps, and we keep a written record that everybody's done that test every single day. Well, we only had one machine that did that, and everybody had to touch a button on that machine to be able to test their static grounding. So we stopped it. We've been operating for 3 months now, where we're working on trust. We expect people to wear the right static equipment, but we're not actually using the machine anymore to test everybody because it wasn't going to be feasible to keep it clean. It wasn't going to be sensible to try and control that environment. It was just too high a risk, so we stopped it. We've recorded it for our ISO records and things, and we'll restart it when it's feasible. The other big thing was we knew we had a couple of older people, and we knew that those people had some underlying health conditions, but what we didn't actually know was whether anybody else in the workforce had any serious underlying health conditions. So we did kind of ask for people to confidentially make us aware very early if they felt they had any conditions that we should be taking into account while we considered how we were going to continue to function, if at all, going forward. And that was really important and something that we did very early on, and I would recommend people do that, because at the end of the day, it's very hard to protect your people and do a good risk assessment if you don't know what you're protecting them from, and what risks they might bring to your workplace, or additional problems that they may have that you're just not aware of. Next slide, please. So what did we do in the work environment? We immediately got those two people to one side and said, look, we think you guys are probably going to be high risk from everything we've seen on the news. You've got the types of problems that they're talking about. So, and we actually sent those people home very, very early and told them not to worry about it, made sure they could work from home where possible. Said even if that's going to be a problem going forward, we'll work around it. Just get yourself safe and secure, and then we'll worry about everything else after that. We immediately minimized the people coming on site. One area in particular that was a real concern in the very early days was delivery drivers. Like most of you, we get a lot of couriers every single day. They've probably been to 15, 20, 40 places before they arrive at us. So we took our goods inward and stores guy to one side very early on, explained to him that we thought he was probably in one of the most exposed roles in the business, explained to him that we shouldn't sign for any more deliveries. The delivery companies adopted that quite quickly as well, but I think we were probably ahead of a few of them. Told him it was perfectly okay for him to go and wash his hands after every single delivery, to refuse deliveries if he felt the drivers weren't operating correctly, and really try and empower him a little bit. As I said, delivery companies in general, I believe, have been pretty good now, and those of you that have had things delivered home will know that they're dropping them on the doorstep, walking back up the drive, and then waiting for you to open the door. That sort of thing's tending to happen. We were very lucky from a 2-meter spacing point of view and everything, that we do have a lot of space. I ran a factory in Wrexham for about 12 years prior to coming here a year ago, and quite frankly, in the factory in Wrexham, I think it would have been very, very difficult, if not impossible. Whereas luckily here we've got space, and we're able to spread out. And because we've got a lot of automation, there's not so many people in our process. Canteen and toilets were problematic. We took the chairs away in the canteen and only left one chair per table, limited the number of people with access to the canteen. But of course, you've still got some common touch points there. You've got things like kettles and toasters and fridge doors and cutlery drawers. So we've just had to accept that that's there, and people work for 8 or 10 hours a day, and they do need access to those facilities. So we've just increased the level of cleaning. actually our cleaners stopped coming to the business, so we've taken that on ourselves, and our people again have really rose to that challenge, and they're being probably more pedantic and better at cleaning than our cleaners. So not entirely sure we'll have a cleaning company in the future. The other things we did was we looked at people's anxiety early on, when we had long discussions about what we do if people have to self-isolate, and should we pay them, or how do we support them, what do we do? And we decided, because it was very early days and we didn't really know how many people were going to be in that position and how much it was going to cost the company, we'd start out by saying that we would support people and give them full pay for any self-isolation period, but we did leave a caveat in there that we would only do that for as long as it was possible, and if the world changed and everybody was self-isolating, or if we had no business whatsoever, we'd have to review that policy. But we've had 3 people who've had a period of self-isolation put away from the business, and I think we've possibly had 1 or 2 people that have had COVID-19, but not while at the business. They tend to have partners who work in healthcare, and they're contracted at home, and luckily they're contracted at home while they've been working from home, so they've not actually been at the business during that period of time. Another good thing we did was we set up a WhatsApp group, and it was more just because I wondered about keeping people informed. What it's actually turned into is a bit of a support group where people are posting, you know, the usual social media jokes and videos and things. And it's not for everybody. Some people have left the group. Some people are sort of there as lurkers, silently watching it. But about 10, so about a third to a quarter of our people are actually really active on it, and I think that's because they find it useful and supportive, and that's about everybody being a little bit different, and recognizing that and allowing that sort of banter and that conversation to go on. Some people live alone, some people don't have family close by, and I think our WhatsApp groups really fill the gap there. So that's certainly been constructive for us. Next slide, please. Just reiterating what Phil said, very early we really went back and dug deep into our customers, and we haven't got a huge number of customers. We've probably only got about 50 or 60 active customers. Turns out we didn't really know what they did precisely. So for example, which markets are they in, who was still working, what were our risks, how exposed were we on stock, how exposed were we on credit, what did we have in progress that we should or shouldn't be doing. Turns out about 90% of our customers pretty much stopped overnight. So pretty much from end of February, we probably haven't received a single order from about 90% of our customers, which obviously would have been hugely problematic, and we probably would have furloughed and shut down had that been 100% of our customers. But we did have 2 customers in medical devices, and we always knew those customers worked in medical devices because we have to take extra precautions. But what we didn't realize is quite how critical the equipment was. So one of our customers makes blood gas analyzers, which are actually used to monitor the level of carbon dioxide and nitrogen and things in people's blood while they're on a ventilator. So those machines have become in huge demand, and we're actually being asked to make about 2 years worth of supply in the next 3 months, which as we'll talk about in a moment, is becoming hugely problematic for us. It's great. We've got orders coming out of our ears, but we've got building supply chain problems, which I think we'll come on to. Next slide, please. So as Phil again said, alluded, it's often said cash is king. Well, I think over the last 3 months, cash certainly has been king. We've always done a cash flow forecast every week. We've always reviewed it, but I would say it's been clawed over with a fine-tooth comb. It's been incredibly important to us to get our cash flow as accurate as possible and to continue updating it even midweek as things have moved around. Early doors, we've got some customers on quite long credit terms. One or two of our customers are on 90 days, and while they're our biggest customers, that doesn't mean they were necessarily going to pay on time. So in March, we pulled every string we could, and we pushed really hard to collect as much of that cash as possible, and we did a really good job. We went to some of our end customers and asked them to put some pressure on their subcontractors that we deliver to help us get cash in. And to be fair, they did that. So Siemens in particular were fantastic at helping us gather cash off one of their subcontractors. We were very careful in the very early days as well. We put a new set of rules around our purchasing controls. So purchasing controls were in place. They were probably, well, I think they're around £15,000 that our buyers could just place purchase orders for without any controls in place. Overnight, we tightened that up, and we made it basically every single purchase order was checked and agreed before we placed it, because we really didn't know what was going on and where we would head, but we knew we needed cash. We wanted to be able to pay our people whenever possible. The other areas we've been very successful with cash is HMRC, to be absolutely honest, have been fantastic with us. They've allowed us to defer 2 quarters worth of VAT so far, which is probably more like £150,000 now. So that's money that we haven't paid. Obviously, we'll be paying it back in the future, but having an extra 150k in cash flow there has been great. A little bit later, we were also able to defer PAYE and employers NI, which is probably given us about another 80k of working capital. And we're in the process of trying to get a bounce back loan, which should be straightforward, but is proving to be anything but straightforward. I don't know. I'm not going to say who we bank with, but I don't think we'll be banking with them in the future. It's been the most awkward thing. I would have thought dealing with the government would have been difficult, but actually the banks have been unbelievably difficult. Next slide, please. So we've rolled out up until now, and things have been a little strange, a little bit unusual, but we've got through it, and we've had people pull together, and it's been great. Where we're starting to see problems is as Phil alluded, it's supply chain. So in March we had no problems. We could get whatever components we want. It was largely business as usual. By April, we were starting to find it a little difficult to get things into the building. We could still buy them, but we're starting to struggle to get them here, and that's because obviously commercial aircraft stopped flying. And turns out, I didn't know this, but about 80% of freight goes on commercial aircraft, not in special freight aircraft. So we were trying to get things in from China and other parts of the Far East, Taiwan. We just couldn't find a carrier to bring them to us. And when we did find a carrier to bring them to us, freight costs had at least doubled, and it still remains that way. So anybody working on thin margins and looking at landed costs, then freight's a real problem at the moment, and I think it will continue for quite some time. Going into May, we're starting to see some shortages. That basically the supplies that were in the distribution channels had all dried up, and of course, when you've got an entire supply chain stopped all the way back to literally digging minerals out the ground, then it's it really is a very long sausage machine, and it's very, very much stalled at the moment. We had huge problems bringing in printed circuit boards. Suppliers that we've used for years that have been fantastic, promising us that they would be shipped 1 week, and then literally a day before they're due to ship, delaying them by 3-4 weeks. We've had to take some risks and buy components from new suppliers. Risks we really wouldn't ordinarily take, especially since we're making medical devices, but we genuinely would have been stopped several times in May if we hadn't got a little bit innovative about where we were getting our components from. We've had crazy things like, for example, one of our main boards has got a connector on it, and that connector is 80 pence. They've gone up to £4 or £5 each, and even those supplies are now exhausted. So last week we spent the entire week begging and pleading basically with the manufacturer of that connector to give us some. Again, we leveraged our contacts inside Siemens and got the sort of senior commodity buyers at Siemens to try and buy them. We asked Siemens to check their stocks around the world at their other factories to see if they used that component. And the good news is by Friday, and it really did take all week, but by Friday we had an express shipment from Germany of about 8,000 connectors. We actually only needed about 4,000. That's all we'd asked for. So we managed to get our message across and get more than we'd asked for, to be fair. But it took up the entire week of 2 or 3 people trying to do that, and it's going to be the same going forward, because when you've got 600 components on a circuit board, if any one of them's missing, we've got a problem. So I think all of our efforts for the future are going to be in our supply chain, managing it, understanding it, making sure they're aware of our requirements. So there's a lot of allocations at the moment where you really have to justify, you have to hand over your plans, your production plans. They want to help you, but they're not going to give everything to you and leave somebody else short. So it's about being open, honest, and a lot of communication in the supply chain. And I can see that going on for the rest of this year, to be honest. I think it's probably the new normal, certainly in our industry, where the supply chain is quite long and it's very, very far east based. We're going to be putting probably 4 or 5 times the amount of effort we normally do into our supply chain just to try and keep the cogs turning. I think that's pretty much where we're at right now.
David, that was hugely useful and really practical things that I think everyone will appreciate to hear. Interested to hear some of the things that you mentioned, which we've heard before from a few people, particularly around the freight going in passenger planes, which has caused problems. We are hearing from the IT and from others that that's now starting to normalise a little bit. So we'll hopefully be able to see some progress being made there. But any queries on that do come to the growth hub, and we can hopefully work through that. Before I go to some of the questions, I'd like to also pick up on the supply chain issue, which again is clearly hugely important. Phil, I'm just thinking in terms of that, is there anything that Manufacturing Growth Fund or others in your network can do to support businesses with maybe kind of shorten that supply chain or looking at other avenues?
We've been looking around that. Do I need to put the video on, or can I just talk? I'll start the video. Okay. Yeah, okay. We've been looking around that. We've been trying to, especially in the NHS sort of supply chains, trying to connect people up, trying to look for gaps in the market, and where people can diversify. So there's been a lot of change in hand sanitizers and people moving into that, especially gin companies. There's been a lot of people moving sort of textile-based operations into moving for PPE and trying to meet some of the demand on that. One of the issues we're finding more than anything is where you've got global supply chains, it's more difficult when some of the other areas like Spain, across Europe, they shut down as well. And it's trying to find that. And we are seeing that demand is increasing for certain parts, which is, as David said, the price is going up tremendously. A couple of clients, what they've decided to do through using some of the funding is actually decide, right, we can't be at the behest now of other people, and they've brought them products back in house and decided to make them themselves. So it's maybe changing the way people do things slightly and looking at how they can do more of their own and shorten those supply chains.
I think that touches on one of the questions that James had just raised around opportunities to source components closer to home. I guess the closest to home is to, in some instances, be able to manufacture that yourself. I think, James, that's a good question that we can certainly put out there in terms of shortening those supply chains. That's something that Phil and growth hubs and labs around the country are certainly looking at, not just as a result of COVID, but as a standing issue anyway.
Yeah, what I would say on supply chains is we've onshored some things. So, for example, we use a lot of CNC metalwork and things, and we're bringing some of that back onshore, just probably temporarily, but just to try and shorten that supply chain. But so much of what we use is made in really highly capital-intensive specialist factories, and those factories just do not exist in Europe anymore. You know, the amount of semiconductors and LCD displays and things made in Europe is virtually zero. So it's very, very difficult in real specialist components.
One of the things we've been looking at over the past 6 to 12 months now is setting up a portal whereby across the Northwest, any manufacturers can come on and register their details and information. And when people are searching, if you've registered that portal, you can search for those component parts close to home. And we're trying to build that sort of as a Northwest base and trying to get as many manufacturers and suppliers on there as we can. It's a work in progress, and it's starting to look at how we can make a more Northwest based supply chain. We used to do it as a manufacturing advisory service a long time ago, but that sort of went with the manufacturing advisory service where you had a more sort of joined up UK-wide supply chain. But if we can start that for the Northwest and get that moving, I think that could be a good starting point.
I think that's well put. And I think that this is the type of opportunity I think that we all need to look at to see how can we work close together and input into things like that. What I would say to all businesses is if you to share that information that's relevant to your business, the more information we have, we can share that with government, with people like Phil and those other networks, so we can try and get some movement on some of these things. Working through some of the other questions. Phil, is there anything? I think there's one around obviously the things that the manufacturing growth fund and obviously 15%. Sorry, £15,000, 36%. Can you go into some more specifics on the type of project that can fund?
Yeah, I can send everybody a scope document as well that'll give you a far more fluid breakdown. But it's around looking at bringing in the expertise to help you to do some of those things. So we'll work with any business and do a diagnostic and look at the shortfalls. But it's looking at things like strategy. Have you sort of like looked at whether it's operations, sales and marketing, whether it's business strategy? Bringing in that sort of fresh pair of eyes, looking at, as we said before, lean manufacturing, looking at how we can actually get people to start thinking more about how they can be lean. And it's not just lean, it's agile, it's flexible, because if you come too lean, you lose opportunities sometimes. So it's looking at being a more agile business, being able to change and shape yourselves quicker into more opportunities. Whether you're thinking about designing new products, like one of the companies I mentioned just earlier, they've designed a brand new energy logger module controller for one of their products, which they were buying it from Italy at something like £900, and now they can actually make it for £50. They got support to actually design, create that, do the coding for it, and that's really gone to market now as a really good product. Whether you're looking at developing new markets through things like sort of traditional sales and marketing techniques, or developing the web more and using some of the techniques that are available to find more customers or diversify supply chains even. It's things like that. It's where you've got gaps in your business where you can actually look at saying, how can we fulfill them if we don't have the internal ability or internal resources to do that? And that 15K project size is the happy medium. So as I say, we've had projects up to £24,000 and projects at £3,000. And that spectrum in the middle, 15K is usually the one where it's like a 10 to 15 is a sweet spot. But that spectrum of support we see, from the low to the high end, and they all make impacts. And it's just having that fresh pair of eyes, that fresh sort of perspective on your business that you work in every day, and you think, if someone can also just give me some guidance on how to choose things differently, that's where we make the maximum impact, Andy.
Thanks, Phil. That's much appreciated, and we'll be sharing that. We share that information on our website, and if anyone's got any query on that, please do contact the Growth Hub or anything else. Quickly, just another question for David is, you mentioned that you may be looking to look at a different bank. We won't go into any more details on that. And there's a question around: is there any other suppliers that you'd be looking to change, or because of this, and has it kind of brought home any new issues around that?
I think it's highlighted the risk of being single sourced a lot. It's kind of the nature of what we do as well, though. We've got a lot of testing and approval to go through, and therefore you tend to do that testing once, and then you try and make it. And especially when you're operating in things like medical markets, you're forced to maintain your supply chain. But we were single sourced on more things than we would like, and it has caused us pain, and it's forced us now to dual source in several areas. And that's not without risk, as I said, but obviously it'll be a benefit to the business in the future because we've got that extra flexibility, and we'll be able to negotiate a little bit harder. I have to say we've been pretty good at that over the years. We've managed to maintain an image of a broad supply base where we perhaps didn't always have one. But yeah, we'll definitely be more conscious of second sourcing, even though it brings us difficulties.
Thanks, David. That's really helpful. What I would say is, before we finish off, we're just about out of time, is firstly a big thanks to Phil and David. I think given lots of things to think about there, and lots of practical tips and things that they've actually gone through. So this will go live. So if the slides will be on our website, so you can feel free to look at that. And what I would say also is if there's any questions on any of the content, particularly around things like the bounce back funds, bounce back loans, that type of thing that you're not sure on, or you want to access some of that, the Growth Hub team is always there waiting to speak to businesses and guide you through that process, or just have a chat around some of the things and you're not really sure what the outcome may be. The team is there to help. That could be around COVID, it could be around finance, it could be around training and skills. We have the Accelerate program now live. So anything that you think that you need some support on, don't hesitate to get in touch with the Growth Hub. If there's something specific that you'd like to ask Phil or David, I'm sure we can pass that on as well. But it's important that if you do need support, then please do ask for it, and we'll do our best to make sure you get the best tailored support for you. Just another thanks then to Phil and David. We really appreciate giving up your time, particularly on a Monday morning, on a sunny Monday morning. So good luck with everything. And we've got another couple of webinars coming up this week. We've got another one today around professional services, and later in the week we'll be looking at logistics and construction as well. So we'll have some good speakers there. So anything specific that you're looking for, tune into those. As I say, this will be posted on our website shortly. And until then, we'll pick up next time. Thank you very much.